Well, no shortage of issues these days in Alberta politics. Plenty going on, plenty to discuss. Very happy to welcome to the program for more insights on everything going on in Alberta politics these days. He is the Calgary based lead columnist for the National Observer, nationalobserver.com, Max Fawcett, with us on the program. Max, so great to have you with us here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our chat here.
A lot to get into, as mentioned, but I did want to start with the Premier's recently announced Alberta Next panel. We had one of the panel members on this program just recently, something you wrote about as well. So a different kind of perspective, perhaps. Your thoughts on why we're doing this once again?
I think we're doing this once again because it suits the political agenda and the political interests of the UCP government. It's the reason why we did it the first time with Jason Kenney. I think his approach was more measured, more serious. I think he was genuinely trying to address the anger that was out there, which ultimately ended up being directed at him. So he clearly understood the risk there. And I think Danielle Smith, from the very beginning, has decided she is not going to lose the way other Conservative premiers have lost. Whether it's Ed Stelmach or Alison Redford. Or Jason Kenney, she's not going to be defeated by her own party membership, by her base. And so she is going to do whatever it takes to keep them in the tent, in the fold, and aligned with her leadership. And that's what this exercise is all about. It's about capturing the energy from the separatist movement, which she has helped create, and preventing it from finding a new political vehicle. And she has said as much. She's acknowledged that she doesn't want to see another political party formed. And I promise you, she's not talking about another left-wing party. She's talking about an explicitly separatist party. She has failed in that respect because, of course, we have the Alberta Republicans. But that's what this is about. This is about keeping her in charge, in power, and keeping the focus of Albertans aimed at Ottawa rather than at Edmonton.
I mean, it seems pretty clear that if the Conservatives had won the last election federally, that we would not be having this conversation, wouldn't be going through all of this. I think Conservative premiers in Alberta maybe do benefit or try to benefit politically from having a Liberal prime minister. But do you think this is the outcome Danielle Smith wanted or that Danielle Smith envisioned?
I think if you gave Danielle Smith truth serum, she would tell you that she wanted Mark Carney to win the election. She has benefited tremendously, as have, as you say, most Conservative premiers, from having Liberals in power in Ottawa. It's when there's Conservatives in Ottawa that they lose government. And so, she enjoys, and she's very good at setting up that foil of, the evil Ottawa government that is trying to kill your industry and take your job and force you to eat bugs and whatever else it is. And having Pierre Poilievre as the prime minister would get in the way of that. And so I think she was quite happy, privately, to see the Liberals get reelected. She's kind of getting everything she wants right now because we have a Liberal government that is advancing pipelines even more aggressively than the previous one did, is doing a lot of the things policy-wise that I think a Conservative government would have done. It's sort of like we have a progressive Conservative federal government right now, but she still gets to fearmonger about Liberal Ottawa, about their net zero policies, about Stephen Guilbeault, all that stuff. And so it's a real having her cake and eat it too moment for the Premier.
Is there risk, though? You mentioned what happened to Jason Kenney, and I often wonder, was it also a case maybe of Jason Kenney kind of building up expectations, unrealistic expectations, and when that didn't happen or when those things didn't get realized, that movement kind of ate him up? And is there a similar risk to Danielle Smith here in what she's doing and then once again failing to deliver?
I think so. I think if you are lighting matches around canisters of gasoline, there is a risk that things will explode. And I'm not sure it's going to be the same kind of explosion that ultimately took Jason Kenney down. I do think that she will ride or die with the furthest right reaches of her party. You look at the Alberta Next proposal or the process, and then you look at the recent, I don't know if you call it a budget or a vision statement or whatever it was, but tabled by the I believe it's the Alberta Prosperity Project, the explicit separatists. There is not a lot of daylight between what they're talking about and what the Premier has talked about. So I think if there is a risk for her here, it is that progressive Conservatives, the middle flank of her party, are going to just say, this is too much. It's enough. Maybe the business community starts to really push back when we feel the effects of the uncertainty this is creating. You've already had Nancy Southern, the CEO of ATCO, come out and say that the separatist stuff is not good for business. They've had investors walk away from a project they want to build because they don't want to touch the province right now. So you may get the business community aligning behind a more moderate conservative option, and lo and behold, you have the two MLAs who left the caucus who have now are trying to revive the progressive conservative brand. So it may be that in over-indexing to the further right reaches of the UCP, she is opening up the door to a revolt from the left fringe of the UCP, if you can call it that. History repeating or rhyming, but not repeating, I suppose.
It's interesting. I mean, Peter Guthrie was an early supporter of Danielle Smith. He was a critic of Jason Kenney's COVID policy. He's not someone you'd consider to be a red Tory per se, but I mean, it seems like a pretty principled guy. And so I think the way in which he left the party, and Scott Sinclair too, is interesting. I don't know. I mean, do you see that this new PC Alberta Party, is this going anywhere?
Never say never in Alberta politics, as we both know. I think there's Paul Wells, ex-Maclean's writer. He wrote these rules for Canadian politics back in the day, and one of his rules was always expect the most boring outcome to be the one that happens. And in Alberta, it's the opposite. Always expect the most exciting or dramatic outcome to be the one that happens. And so I think something could happen here. You're right. These are not red Tories. I think all the red Tories have more or less fled the party to the NDP, but maybe that is part of the appeal for Peter Guthrie and the party that he's trying to create here is they can bring those people back from the NDP. There's a lot of red Tories who they voted NDP not because they love the NDP, but because they are so dismayed by the way in which the UCP has drifted to the right. And if there is suddenly a principled, pro-business, small government party, a more conventional, traditional conservative option, I think you could see just as much bleed from the NDP as you would from the UCP. And then we have a whole new ballgame.
Speaking of the NDP, I mean, Nenshi finally got his big by-election win. He'll be in the legislature finally. But I don't know, what do you make of some of these concerns or arguments maybe that he stumbled or that the NDP is underperforming right now?
I've made some of those arguments, and I've gotten some interesting flack from some of my progressive friends. But he has been, to my mind, just incredibly underwhelming. He came in with this enormous mandate. I think the NDP really the membership looked at him as a savior, and he seems to be running and carrying himself like he's running for the mayor of Alberta, and that's not a job. That's not a thing. He clearly thinks that the key issue is going to be leadership. It's going to be, do people like him more than they like Danielle Smith? And I regret to inform him and his supporters, but they like Danielle Smith more than they like him. The leadership ballot is not as one-sided as I think he would like to think. And the NDP actually has to have a strategy here that goes beyond Naheed Nenshi as the leader. It has to have policies. It has to have direction. It has been very absent from the debate around separatism, from the debate around our place in Confederation, and there was an interesting idea floated by Lisa Young, professor at the University of Calgary, that in response to the Alberta Next panels, the NDP should set up their own set of panels that actually look at the future, but from a optimistic, genuinely future-looking perspective. What are we going to build here over the next 20 or 30 years? I don't see the NDP doing that. I think that would be a really interesting exercise in narrative building, but they seem convinced, or at least Nenshi seems convinced, that he alone can fix it, that he is the solution, and as long as his name is on the ballot, they'll be okay in the next election. I don't think the numbers support that.
Well, it certainly doesn't look like it right now. I mean, a lot can change, as you say, between now and the next election, whenever that is. Do you think, by the way, that could be sooner than we think, next year, perhaps?
I do. I keep saying that, floating that I think the play will be to call the election next year after, whatever happens with these referendums. I don't think it will go to term. I've had people have pushed back and said, Danielle Smith was there when Jim Prentice went to the polls early and saw what that did. But 2015 is 1,000 years ago in politics right now. And I think that she might try to capitalize on the frustration that will be out there, and a ballot question that shouldn't really be to her advantage. Do you like Canada, or do you love Canada more than Alberta? But maybe will be, because she has so thoroughly controlled that narrative and dominated that field of play.
We got these dueling petitions. I spoke with Thomas Lukaszuk last week, and the Alberta Prosperity Project, and they're trying to advance their own petition. So different kind of aims and objectives, a different question each would pose. But does it seem one way or another that we're getting a referendum?
It seems like that's a slam dunk at this point. I think the separatists are better organized. They have more passion behind what they're doing. They have I think the tacit, maybe not support of the Premier's office and her party, but certainly they are making the conditions as easy as possible for there to be a referendum on this issue. And so I guess their theory of the case is that this will help them let off steam. It will be defeated, and then we will move on. I mean, David Cameron had the exact same philosophy in Britain about Brexit, and we all remember how that turned out. So I think this is a very volatile situation. My head says that this can't take wind, that there just isn't 50+1% of the Alberta voting public that would go down this road, given the risks, given the downsides. But the inequity in the willingness to fight on the two sides makes me nervous. And the information landscape that we have, Senator Paula Simons was on a podcast the other day talking about how, her columns in the Edmonton Journal used to be read by, hundreds of thousands of people, and they could move political opinion. And today it just doesn't work that way. And I worry about that. I think, you could have people writing in the Edmonton Journal, the Calgary Herald. I could write my column saying, look, go through the numbers, go through the data. This is a terrible idea. It doesn't matter as much in this landscape that we're in right now, this media landscape. And the people who are pushing this know how to use the tools at their disposal. And they have some very powerful tools, including, again, the perhaps not support of the Premier, but the cooperation or the unwillingness of the Premier to come at this hard. Her job should be to knock this down. And she seems determined at every turn to lift it up. And that could have unintended consequences.
It is interesting because she's made the argument that she is trying to take the wind out of the sails of the separatists by getting a better deal for Alberta. And you wrote in a column recently that I think a lot of these points people are saying about, it's understandable why people feel this way, or Albertans have a right to be mad. Like, do you think that those who are professing to support Canada, believe in Canada, are kind of inadvertently helping the talking points of the separatists?
I do. And I understand why Danielle Smith and Jason Kenney do it, because they've been doing it for so long. I think it's almost like a political muscle. It's reflex at this point that they attack Ottawa, they criticize because it has worked so well for them. But when I hear Naheed Nenshi, and I hate to bag on the guy, but when I hear him basically echoing the same argument that well, it's true that we've gotten a bad deal, and it's true that the federal government has not done enough to help get our energy to market. It is incredibly frustrating, because that is not true. And I can go chapter and verse on the ways in which the Liberal government, although it has not talked about the oil and gas industry the way they would have wanted to be talked about, has done more to get oil and gas to market than any government in Canadian history. The facts are clear. But, I guess Mr. Nenshi feels like he has to placate that crowd, or he has to sort of start with that as his opener in order to get them to hear his other message. But I worry that the other message gets lost, and all the people hear is, yeah, we are getting screwed by Ottawa. Even Nenshi thinks that we're getting screwed. And eventually that takes hold. If a thing gets repeated enough in the public discourse, it becomes fact in the minds of a lot of people. And then when you try to bring actual facts into the conversation, they just don't work. And that's sort of where we're at today in Alberta. I feel like I can talk to people about how we're not really getting screwed. The federal government has actually been pretty good at the things that you profess to care about, but that's not what it's about. It's about their feelings. They want to feel like victims. They want to blame somebody for the changes that are happening in global energy markets, the energy transition. I read a story today that the CEO of Ford in the United States bought a Chinese EV and is just blown away by how far ahead they are. Like the things that are happening in China are happening, and being mad at Ottawa is not going to change that. But it gives people a sense of agency to be able to blame Trudeau or the Liberals rather than these global changes they can't stop impacting their own lives. And that to me is what this panel should be about. If the Alberta Premier is having a panel hosting discussions, let's talk about what the actual future in this province is. We have a lot of opportunities. We have great things at our disposal that we can be doing. We can make lots of money, get lots of investments. But if we spend all of our energy being mad at Liberals in Ottawa, we are going to miss the bus here, the electric bus, and it is going to run us over. And then we're going to have some real problems to complain about.
Well, we still have a Liberal government. I think, as we say, that kind of precipitated a lot of what's happening now. But it's clearly a very different Liberal government, a different Liberal Prime Minister. Mark Carney is not Justin Trudeau. So how much of a factor is Mark Carney and what we're seeing with Bill C-5, even over the weekend, suggesting that, a new pipeline could be one of these new projects that are in the national interest?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very different kind of government. And you see that not just in the way Mark Carney talks about oil and gas, the way he talks about the urgency to build things. You see it in the way it's staffed. You see it in the senior leadership in the office and in the Privy Council. These are all business people. These are people who care about business. And admittedly, Mark Carney and his view of how business works is different from Danielle Smith. It's different from Pierre Poilievre. But he is a very formidable opponent on an issue that they have basically had free reign since Justin Trudeau was elected. Justin Trudeau did not spend much time, and that's being generous, thinking about the economy, thinking about markets, thinking about attracting investment. Mark Carney does. He spent his whole life thinking about that stuff, and he is bringing that focus to bear on a bunch of key issues. And we'll see over the next few months what actually comes of it. I am skeptical that there is a business case for a new oil pipeline to Tidewater. I think it will have to be built by the government, whether it's the government of Alberta or the government of Canada. But this is a new government, and Canadians are treating it that way. I know Conservatives in Ottawa are frustrated. They feel like this is just the same old guys. It's the Trudeau retreads. But I was on Ben Mulrooney's show this morning with Anthony Couch, who's former Poilievre staffer, and he said, whether his conservative friends like it or not, Canadians treat this as a new government. They wanted change. They're getting change. Yeah. And I think everyone kind of has to reset their thinking on that. This may be the continuation of a Liberal government, but it is a brand new approach to governing.
Well, it feels like that could be a game changer in Alberta. I think the ardent separatists will say it goes way deeper than that. They sort of reject the whole idea of Canada, or Canada's a lost cause, or Canada's too woke, or, we can stop paying federal tax and we'll all be rich. Like they've got all these other arguments. But I think just to maybe average Albertans or conservative Albertans, right, the idea of seeing this kind of a project, or seeing a government that's willing to take on that political risk and say, yeah, we're going to do this. I think that would go a long way in changing a lot of the sentiment here. Do you think?
I think it would on the margins, on where it counts. There is a constituency, let's call it, that would be for separation no matter what. And it was that way under Harper. It was that way under Mulroney. Like there's just a group of people that just do not like Canada. They are maybe pro-American. They have views about the way the world should work, and it goes well beyond sort of brass tacks issues that most people care about. But, in the cities, in Calgary and Edmonton and Red Deer and Lethbridge, among longtime conservative voters, I was playing golf the other day with somebody who said, he was a lifelong conservative voter, but he voted for Carney because he thought that he got it. He thought that he understood the mission, the job description, and was doing well so far. And I think there are a lot of people out there like that who appreciate that Carney and the Liberal government right now are listening to Alberta, taking it seriously, and putting some skin in the game. Now, I feel like a broken record on this. The Liberals under Trudeau put lots of skin in the game. They lost votes in BC for buying and building TMX, and that doesn't seem to really register here. But it's always been the way the government talks about it that seems to matter more, not what they do, right? And Trudeau and certainly Stephen Guilbeault never talked about it the right way. And Carney does. Carney talks the language of business. He talks the language of investment, job creation. And I think it's just going to be really hard for Danielle Smith to keep making people angry at this guy when he's clearly trying to do the right thing for this province and more importantly for this country. And if she wants to go all the way to the right and rail against climate change, rail against net zero, I think that puts her in a very precarious position. I think Albertans are ultimately quite pragmatic about this stuff. But that is the choice that she's going to have to face, because this is not the same guy that she was dealing with over the last 3 years.
Speaking of Pierre Poilievre, I mean, what do you make of his situation now? He seemed like a conservative leader built to defeat Justin Trudeau, but he didn't get that opportunity. And I think a lot of uncertainty around his future. He's got to win a by-election here, which I'm sure he will, but to win over these people, I think, who are kind of almost writing off Canada, right? This is this constituency that he needs. And we see the polls, we see everything else going on. What do you make of his situation?
I think it's bleak. My opinion on internal conservative politics, I put large amounts of water in that particular wine because I'm not close to it. But people I know who are close to it have had similar perspectives, that he's in trouble. That, like you say, he was a machine built to do one job, and then the job changed, and he still seems to want to do that one job, which is defeat Justin Trudeau. One of the pundits, I think it was Corey Tanaik, was saying, in a lot of ways, Pierre Poilievre is more like Justin Trudeau than Mark Carney is. He has a lot of similar qualities to Trudeau. He has a lot of similar qualities to Donald Trump, and that's just not a good fit right now. So he is going to try, as he always does, to really kind of double down on the base, on the online part of the party, and it might save his leadership. I think we saw things during the election campaign where it looked to me like he was pivoting from trying to win the election to trying to save his job, to really kind of keeping the base on his side. But I've seen some influencers, some folks who are just diehard Poilievre supporters who have kind of said, this guy can't get the job done. He's not the guy to do what we need to do. And I don't know where the Conservative Party goes from here. That is not my remit. But my suggestion, I've said this in columns I've written, is they don't need to moderate. They don't need to become red Tories, because that's not really a thing anymore. Mark Carney has all those voters locked up. He is basically a progressive conservative government. But they just need to find someone who looks and acts like a prime minister. Right. I think one of the biggest mistakes they made in hindsight was getting rid of Aaron O'Toole. I think Aaron O'Toole would have done much better in the last election. I think he might have won. But they need someone like that, who is a conservative, who has conservative beliefs, but isn't petulant, isn't grating, doesn't drive women voters away the way Poilievre seems to, and it isn't sort of terminally online. I think we are going to be moving away pretty quickly from this moment of kind of maximum Trumpism. And people are going to want leaders who do not look like Donald Trump, not ones who do. And right now, Poilievre is not passing that test.
Well, what's interesting, Monday, the Calgary Stampede, or in Calgary, we saw this press conference, Danielle Smith and Doug Ford, these memorandums of understanding, and they're both kind of railing against federal policy. I don't think Danielle Smith has any national aspirations, but I do wonder about Doug Ford. And I mean, look, I was like a lot of people when Doug Ford ran for the Ontario PC leadership back in the day. I'm like, there's no chance. This guy's too out there. I wouldn't write off his chances after what he's been able to pull off. But I don't know. Do you see Doug Ford maybe as a lot of speculation as to whether he's angling for Pierre Poilievre's job at some point?
It seems like a possibility. There's rumors that he's taking French lessons. I don't think anyone expects Doug Ford to be good in French. But we just saw in the last election, Mark Carney wasn't that good in French either. And it didn't seem to matter to Quebec voters, not one bit. And so maybe that isn't as important of a quality as maybe we thought it was once. Doug Ford's most important attribute, I think, as a politician, and the biggest contrast with Poilievre, is he's likable. People like him. My wife was at a conservative event yesterday, and she took a picture with him. She sent it to me. She was charmed. She's like, I got a picture with Doug. He is a likable, warm human being, and that, I think, resonates with a lot of people. There's a lot of voters, a lot of people I met back in Ontario, because I have family there, who were Trudeau Ford voters. And I couldn't understand it. I was like, how can you support Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford? And the more as time has gone on, the more I understand. Oh no, that's a real thing. He has appeal that goes beyond the Conservative base, and that's exactly what they need. They need a guy who can go beyond that like angry online base of young men and really kind of bring women in, bring immigrants in, bring traditional Liberal voters in. And he might be the person on the landscape right now best suited to that. I would also suggest, I think it's not great that the Liberals have not had a woman as leader and prime minister in their history. I think it's kind of shameful that Canada's only had Kim Campbell for that hot minute as prime minister. If there was ever a party that was positioned to do it, it's the Conservatives. I think our first female prime minister will be a Conservative, and I, whether it's Christy Clark, whether it's Lisa Raitt, whether it's Rona Ambrose, whoever it is, there are tons of talented women who are in that movement, in that community, and maybe it's time for one of them to step forward and become leader.
Interesting point. We'll leave it there. Much more from you. As mentioned, nationalobserver.com. You're on X at Max Fawcett. Max, thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate this.
Yeah, it was a good chat, Rob. Anytime.